with us their field experiences. I would also like to recognize members from the TADAT Secretariat who are with us on call today. I would like to recognize members from the Tax Administration, Jamaica. I would like to also recognize members from Zambia Revenue Authority, and also would like to recognize members from Uganda Revenue Authority, from Kenya Revenue Authority, Tanzania Revenue Authority, as well as Qatar, where we have a platform for bringing all of us together to share with each other. So as we start off today, our topic is enhancing compliance management through the use of digital fiscal devices. And today we have a keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker is Mr. Doja. We also have panel members from Uganda and Mr. Hassan Wasaja. We have Ms. Hakamba Wangwe from Uganda Revenue Authority. And we will still be joined by another member from Tanzania Revenue Authority. I'd like to start off by asking our panel members to introduce themselves to us so that we can get familiar with them. Over to you, David Boja.
Okay. Hello, good morning, good afternoon for everybody. It's a pleasure to stay with you in this discussion. I want to thank everybody, the organizers, the Kenya Revenue Authority, and the TADAT Secretariat for inviting us to share with you some ideas, and also for the colleagues who will participate with us, Hakamba, who is in the Kenya Revenue Authority as a chief manager, Hassan, who is the project manager in Uganda Revenue Authority, and Honest Naju, coordinator for digital taxation project team in Tanzania Revenue Authority. Also, thanks for everybody in the tax administration that are joining us and taking time to hear us. And I hope everything that we can share with you is useful for the daily tasks that you are performing in your work. My name is David Borja. I work for the Inter-American Center of Tax Administration. I am a project manager. I am also a TADAT assessor, and it's a pleasure to stay with you.
Hey, thank you so much, David. We'll then hear from Ms. Hakamba Wangwe from Kenya Revenue Authority.
Thank you, Blenda. As you've heard, my name is Hakamba Wangwe. I'm Chief Manager in charge of the tax invoice management system, maybe the subject of discussion today. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Hakamba. We'll then hear from Hassan Wasaja.
Very good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I am extremely delighted to be part of this team. I would want to thank the TADAT Secretariat for always ensuring that there is a platform similar to this where we can meet, share experiences, share challenges, and with the aim of making sure that we get the best to ensure that we mobilize domestic revenue in a manner that is convenient and efficient. I thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Hassan. I'll then move on to one of our panel members. Is having a little bit of issues, but he should be joining us soon. I'll introduce myself as well. My name is Blenda Nakazi Mogeza. I work with Uganda Revenue Authority, and I'm privileged to moderate today's session. I'd like us to start off quickly because we have exactly 1 hour. We exactly have 1 hour with you today. And I'd like to start off with Mr. David Boja, who is going to give us the context of the topic of discussion today. He's going to take us through why electronic fiscal devices for tax administrations. He's going to take us through what success means in terms of the use of the electronic fiscal devices for compliance management, and also a call to action to tax administrations. And thereafter, we'll have our panel members contributing further to what has been shared with us. And at this point in time, I'd like to hand over to you, Boja. Mr. Boja.
Excellent. Thank you, Blenda, for facilitating this activity and for moderating the discussion. Please let me know if you can see my screen. I will share a presentation with everybody.
We can't see it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the presentation, as you mentioned, I will give you some context about the experience that we have using electronic documents and in the invoices in the region that we work, and also some ideas that we performed during this experience with this kind of implementation. Just to put you in context about TADAT, TADAT is quite similar to ATAF, the African Tax Administration Forum. We have been working with tax administrations since 1965. Now we have 55 years. We work only with national tax administration, not with local governments. And we have a presence in the continent of America, in Europe, in Africa, and South Asia with India. The Kenya Revenue Authority is a member from CIAT, and it's a pleasure to speak with the colleagues. We have been working with them in some projects in the past, so we have some ideas also with them for the improvement of the processes. The main activities that we perform is the studies, international cooperation, exchanging experiences between tax administrations. That's the meaning of international cooperation for us. We provide some training in different topics for interests of the tax administration officials, and technical assistance on demand with specific projects to improve the processes of the tax administration. So just to put you in context, based in the definitions that we have in CIAT, in a book which is called ICT as a strategic tool to leapfrog the efficiency of tax administrations, we should understand first what we are mentioning with the fiscal registers and the reporting inside the tax administration. And what we understand as a fiscal registry is an electronic device, as you can see in the screen, that is used to print the receipts or invoices that are receiving the taxpayers after having a transaction between them. It is business to business or business to consumer, and it has some years in the market, and we have in place this kind of technology and devices since the 20th century. It has some evolution during the time. At the beginning, we just received the information after processing, and maybe in some cases the tax administration official goes for the offices of the taxpayer and retrieve the information, collect it, and take this information for the tax administration and processes it based in a technology with a fiscal memory. It was the name that they had. And it had some controls to avoid some problems with security, that information is erased, or maybe they have some differences in the information that they had in the electronic device and the information that finally received the tax administration. At the beginning of the 21st century, new technology allowed fiscal registers to share that information directly to the tax administration using the internet and the online services that we have now inside the society. So it evolved, and facilitate the costs and reduce the costs for the tax administration, simplifying the tasks, and is not necessary right now to go for the tax administration office for the taxpayer, or the tax organization to go for the taxpayer offices to collect that information. So it evolved. The electronic device had some evolution during the time, but during this evolution of the technology since 2010, we have some modifications in the way that the tax administration decided to receive the information of the invoices and the operations that they have between the businesses, and mainly it started with the business-to-business activities, and some of the countries that we have in CIAT, the country members in CIAT, decided to avoid using not the fiscal registers, and they changed it to use software, not the registers in the region of the Americas that we work for. In the actual times, we have most countries that are involved in the implementation of software-based solutions to receive the information from the tax administration, and in some cases they started to replace this technology with the software-based information. That's the common framework that they are using, and in some cases we facilitated the implementation of this technology. And now, in the context that we have in the Americas, we have Venezuela. Venezuela is using these fiscal registers, and they had success using that information. That's one of the examples that we have right now, but also we have this kind of registers in Panama. In Panama right now, they are developing a project to change the fiscal registers and start using the electronic invoice. That's the reality that we have right now in the countries that we work for in TIAT. But it's not depending on the technology or maybe the strategy that is using the tax administration, but it's important in the side that and the decisions that all the tax administration took, and they analyzed it to implement this kind of technology. Even the tax, the fiscal documents and the fiscal devices, is that we need to improve the control capabilities of the tax administrations, and the control, and it is more based in the control of the VAT returns, how the taxpayer feels that information. And also we want to improve the services that the taxpayer has for the final consumer. Also, we want to pre-fill the tax returns. What we want is to reduce the cost of compliance. And with the information that we receive from the electronic documents and the invoices, the idea that all the tax administrations, and they started to do it, for example, in Chile since 67, and in Ecuador 3 years ago, we started to send the information for the taxpayer about the returns, because we have all the information about the invoices and pre-fill it. So they decide to send this information to the tax administration without moving any data or changing the data that they have in the screen, and just declare this return. Also, the idea is to have some economic studies to understand the main activities that we have in the country, the relations that we have in the supply chain, and the main problems that we have in the economy. That's the idea of receiving that information. And for the taxpayers, also, we want to reduce the cost that we have fulfill this requirement from the tax administration. What we want is to have integration with the systems that we have to perform and the services and products for the clients, and we want some automation between the processes that we have between the taxpayers. So the idea of having this technology, or when we decide to implement the electronic documents and invoices, the idea is to reduce this cost of compliance and interoperability between them. Also, the definition, we want also to have a benefit for exchanging the goods and services between them, reducing the obligations that we have to storage the documents and printing this information. The idea is also to be good with the environment. That's the trends that we have right now in the society. So implementing these electronic devices and the electronic invoice, it's important to reduce the cost of printing the sheets and the pages that they have to have a proof of the transaction as an invoice. Excuse me, the key elements that we have in Latin America, just to give you an example, is that all the documents that we have right now for the transactions are transmitted to the tax administration in the same time. It depends on the model that they are using right now. We are using the electronic signature, and what is important is that it lowers the cost for the small and mid-sized taxpayers, because this has, in some cases, it is hosted by the tax administration. Tax administration provides a service in a basic software system, so they can do it without investing in any other platform or services to fulfill the requirements from the tax administration. In the Latin America, as I said at the beginning, the electronic invoice is widely used. We have a lot of transactions daily. For example, over 160 billion documents are produced in a year for the Latin America, and 250 documents per second in Mexico. So it depends of the tax administration that we are working for. In the last month, Ecuador decided to implement the electronic invoice for all the transactions, even the business to consumer or the consumer to consumer transactions. So the small, medium, and large taxpayers are developing and sharing with the tax administration an electronic invoice. So we are not having right now transactions with paper, basically with paper, in some countries of the CIAT members. As I said before, the idea or how it looks, the success of the invoices and the electronic documents and the information that we receive from the fiscal devices is using the information for control purposes. And the idea, for example, as you can see in this screen, is that the tax administration share with the taxpayer an information of what transaction they received and what information they should use to prepare the tax return for VAT. So they receive some perception of risk because the tax administration has all the information and they are not able to put inside the tax return some information that is less for the total amount of transactions that the tax administration received during a year. So the pre-filled tax return is the idea and the final result that we have of implementing this fiscal device or the electronic invoice. The idea is that we should start collecting the data and storing this and processing in a timely manner, so the taxpayer can receive it and processes it without moving any data. In the CIAT, in the last 3 months, we finalized the project that we are using the advanced analytics and the artificial intelligence for control. And we are using this information that we receive from the documents, the fiscal documents. And that's the idea, is to detect the fraudulent documents or anomalies that the tax administration has with the taxpayer. The taxpayer, in some cases, wants to have some pieces of invoices that is not real, as the false invoice, and they send this for the tax administration, or maybe they are using some information to avoid paying the final amount for taxes for the tax administration, and they are claiming some credits that are not real because they are deducting some invoices that are false. So the idea of this software that we are developing is based in the data that we collect from the electronic invoice in the case of the Latin America, and the description of the invoice that we have, some data that I will share you in the next slide, uses an algorithm that segments the taxpayers and identify, in some cases, the risk, assess the risk, and assign some information for them to identify what kind of taxpayer has more risk to commit some fraud for the tax administration. And it has a scoring model, a risk. So the taxpayer prioritize, the tax administration, excuse me, prioritize which taxpayer has more risk, and then they execute some control, the audit control. So the idea at the end of having these fiscal devices or the electronic invoice is to use the data, and use the data to have some control, to identify the risk. Some screens of the system that we have is, which is called the electronic invoice anomaly detector, is to have this score for the specific taxpayer, what kind of maybe of the anomalies they have in the supply chain with the transaction between them, and also some anomalies of the total amounts of the invoices that they had in a specific period, based in the historic information that we received from them in the past. So some features or some kind of information or data that we collect is, for example, information from the invoice, but also from the taxpayer registry, and also from the tax returns. And we compare that information between periods and between taxpayers in the same economical activity. And for example, this system receives information from the average total of transactions that they have in a specific month, the number of providers or suppliers that they use to have their activity, the type of economical activity that they have in a specific period, and the number of employees. It's very rare, or not so common, that a specific taxpayer has a big amount of sales, but they have just one employee and also one supplier. So it is not common based in other taxpayers in the same economical activity. So comparing that information, this software that is based with artificial intelligence detect that anomalies and facilitate the work that we have for the tax administration. That's another print of the screen that we have in the system. I will not explain a little about this, just to mention that we can combine the data, see some periods of time that they have this kind of anomalies, having more sales, that it's common, the rank of the information that they have in the supply chain, the total of transactions that they have in periods of time. So based on that comparisons, we can have a more specific data. What's the goal of the action for the tax administrations, and what we we suggest is to start thinking in the data that we need to perform this control with taxpayer. The idea is to receive some information from these tax devices, the fiscal devices, to prepare the tax returns. That's the final idea, and also to process that information between them. What is needed, or what's the idea at the end for all the tax administration, is reducing this cost of compliance, having these kind of solutions in the future, receiving the information for an objective to fulfill a specific objective from the tax administration and for the taxpayer. So the idea is to prepare that information for the returns. That's one of the idea. But also for the tax administration, the idea is to reach efficiency, to reduce the cost that they have to have this operation of the core processes, and having a solution, the fiscal devices or the electronic invoice, needs an analysis of how it's the cost for the taxpayer and the total amount of costs for the tax administrations for developing these solutions. That's what I have for you. If you want more information about the presentation, we have some explanations about the fiscal devices, the electronic invoice in that publication, the publication that you have on the screen. You can download it and investigate a little more of these kind of solutions. So, and other solutions that we are using in these country members from CIET for other core processes. So thank you very much for the audience and for you, Blenda, and the colleagues.
Okay, thank you so much, David. That has been rather elaborate, and it has been a rich experience that you've shared with us of what is happening in the American continent. We have another panel member who has joined us, and he's from Tanzania Revenue Authority. And I'll allow him to introduce himself, but as he introduces himself, I would like him to talk about based on the experience that David has shared with us, and also relating to the experience in Tanzania. We realize that we are at different levels of implementation, but so far what has happened there, we would like to hear from you, Honest, what challenges you have encountered during the initial stages of implementing the electronic fiscal devices in TRA. Honest, over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name is Honest, as you have just introduced me, from the Tanzania Revenue Authority. And of course, as far as electronic fiscal devices are concerned, we commenced the implementation of EFDs back in July 2010. So up until this moment, we have done give or take 12 years. And it has been quite a journey since the commencement to date. It is true there were challenges along the way, and there still are some challenges even as we speak. But speaking of the challenges that we encountered initially, the first issue, of course, was regarding the
Honest.
costs. Yes.
Honest, if you could just be a little louder.
Okay.
I
There.
would appreciate. Thank you.
Okay,
Yes, please.
So, yeah, as I was saying, the first issue that we came across was the cost of the devices. So initially, the devices were of a very high cost, the minimum being 2 million Tanzanian shillings, and the maximum being 6 million Tanzania shillings. So that was the big issue that almost derailed the entire project. And now, as as a countermeasure to ensure that that is dealt with, a lot has been done. And I would like just to share what was done. For example, the first issue included the temporary measure of the government trying to offer these devices for free. That is, the government would pay, and then we would supply these devices to the taxpayers. Also, there were mechanisms in which one could actually claim the costs through either the VAT return or the books of accounts, meaning that they would expense this particular costs and so forth. So that was the number one issue, but it was handled in such a way. Then we had some now technical issues. For instance, we had the issue of network, because our devices came along with a central management system. So the taxpayers were now required to actually ensure that they send a daily report of their sales. And now network became an issue as they attempted to fulfill this. So that was a major challenge. Of course, now it has diminished because we have now introduced devices that can use 3G, meaning that you have a software that you can use across a number of devices, meaning that the choice of device now is with the taxpayer. But that we encountered initially, so the issue of network. Then we had an issue of storage of the output, meaning the receipts or the invoices. And this came as in the face of poor quality of the thermal papers that were being used. And specifically, the issue was with the counterfeit thermal papers that were being smuggled into the market and at times produced illegally. So we had an issue, but now we have had a workaround because now one can use any device to issue these receipts and through the softwares. And now our system now receives each receipt that has been issued as opposed to receiving just a daily report. So now that particular issue has been checked. Then we had the issue of location of these approved suppliers. So we had vendors that would purchase machines from the manufacturer and then they would sell to the taxpayers. So they were required to open offices across all regions in the country, but then it became an issue as far as they are concerned. It became not economical to do that, but then we had some workarounds, including suppliers supporting each other. So if I'm in one particular region whereby I have more clients than my competitor, then we can reach into an agreement, and then that particular competitor can now conduct the after-sale services or troubleshooting services to my clients. Because if I have 50 clients and you have 900 or 1,000 clients, definitely economically, you are in a better position to open up an office. And the other issue that we came across was the issue of repair and maintenance costs. So these costs for maintenance and repairing the machines were very high. So the remedy there was, of course, continuous engagement with these approved suppliers so that the costs can come down. But also now we are considering exempting VAT on the spare parts so that the price can become even much more affordable. The other issue was the issue of awareness at the commencement. So there was misinformation at the start, meaning that when you use an EFD machine, whether or not you're registered for VAT, then for each receipt that you issue, then the government will retain 18% of the sales that are corresponding to that particular receipt. So again, the workaround here or the solution was now intensifying education campaigns through our department. We have a specific department for education and service. So they actually had to step up so as to clear that particular mystery. Then there was now the issue of weak enforcement of the laws, meaning that one can purchase a machine, but that's like 50% as far as compliance is concerned. The other 50% is actually proper usage of the devices. So the remedy came in form of using benchmarking approaches, meaning that you would sit at the taxpayer's business premise and try to monitor their sales. Then we had the door-to-door campaigns, in which we would also take into account whether or not a taxpayer is using the machine, so there'll be some EFD compliance issues. Then we had random surveys. You would just visit certain busy points and start randomly asking buyers whether or not they have been issued with the receipt. And then we have regional teams. So in each region, or at other countries, they call them provinces, we have an office. So at every office, there is an EFD team that is stationed there to follow up on compliance. Then we have also established what we call checkpoints. This is specifically for the transportation sector. So we have established checkpoints in busy routes, and we are targeting transporters of cargo. So at these checkpoints, we'll check whether or not they are being compliant, both the transporter and what these transporters are carrying. So we would need 2 sets of receipts. Then we have zonal teams. So at times, 4 or 5 regions do form a single zone. So they form teams that would go around the region. Then we have system-based reports. So since we are receiving reports from the machines, now we would use those reports to conduct trend analysis. So we may actually call a taxpayer or require a taxpayer to appear, and we would now start deliberating with the taxpayer concerning the trend, the sales trend. Maybe it's not reflecting seasonalities. We are not seeing whether there is a peak season or not. So it appears as if the sales are predetermined. There's a certain level that a certain predetermined threshold and so forth. And lastly, we have, of course, special campaigns. Whenever there is such a need, we carry out very specific campaigns, and the 2 targets are acquisition and proper usage. So I think for now, that's my input from the United Republic of Tanzania. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Honest. Honest has shared with us a lot about what is happening in the United Republic of Tanzania. And part of the key things that I have picked out of what you have shared, if I have got you right, you're doing a lot in the area of supporting voluntary compliance, which is one of the performance outcome areas under the TADAT. For those who might not be aware of what TADAT is in full, it is the Tax Administration Diagnostic Assessment Tool, and it has mainly 9 performance outcome areas. And one of the things, even as the previous speakers have been sharing, is that a lot of input is also placed on effective risk management. Why? Because there's a lot of data coming through the use of electronic fiscal devices. So as we move further, I would like to hear from the other panel members, and I would like to call upon Ms. Hakamba Wangwe from KRA, and would like to hear from you, based on what has been shared with us so far. What has Kenya Revenue Authority done to counter the challenges that Honest Njau has hinted on? Ms. Hakamba?
Yes, thank you, Blenda. For us, I think the first part that we'd like to mention about the challenges that we've had is when we began this implementation, and we started it a long time ago, I think in 2016, but it took us a bit of time to actually settle down on determining what kind of technology is most suitable for our particular jurisdiction, taking into consideration our taxpayers' technological literacy and also looking at the technological environment as a whole, talking about internet connectivity and so forth. So how, at the time, we had consideration for beginning the device-based approach, but we also were very aware that in other jurisdictions, there were other solutions. For example, the software approach that was being implemented and very successfully as such. But then we had, it took too much time, if I would say, as part of our challenge to determine that our current environment is device-based, and for us to move from where we are to where the probably other more advanced countries are, we needed to transition right from our own particular environment by enhancing the device-based approach to be able to transmit tax invoices to the point where now, once that is successfully implemented, then we consider any other alternatives that we can provide for the taxpayers. So this implementation actually just officially began like 16 months ago, effective 1st August 2021. But we have been very aggressive at it to ensure that the taxpayers actually fully on board within a very specific period of time. We have had a few extensions here and there to accommodate the taxpayers, but as of now, we have actually officially just begun the mandatory phase of this implementation. But to get here, it took us how to mitigate this. We had to adopt a corporate approach to this implementation, so that we recognize that it is not about addressing domestic taxes challenges, but the impact of this project was going to affect KRA as a whole. And that's why we had to take it from the topmost leadership of KRA to the extent that down to our tax service stations, and then each of us take a level of responsibility to this implementation. And also, we also were able to determine the kind of resources that are required to be able to deliver a solution of such big impact or to such big magnitude. The other thing is having legislation in place so that even for taxpayers who are a bit hesitant to adopt the solution, considering again, at this point of this implementation, KRA has also been carrying out a lot of automation implementations that are touching on various aspects of customs systems, our domestic taxes systems. And so the visibility of the tax invoice management system was not that much because it was not possible to separate the objective of this implementation and separate it from the others that were being done. But taking into consideration stakeholder engagement and also having legislation in place that strictly guided the taxpayers to come on board with very specific consequences if we don't, has gone a long way to assist us get to the point we've gotten as far as this implementation is concerned. Thank you. Blenda?
Thank you so much, Ms. Hakamba. You've been quite elaborate. And one thing I pick from you is that stakeholder engagements have really worked well for you, especially in terms of managing the change that you have brought on board in the last 16 months. That being said, we would like to hear from Uganda. Hassan, would like to hear from you in terms of URA's perspective. What are some of those elements or components or factors that have led to the successful implementation of EFDs in Uganda, and how long ago did you do this?
Thank you, Brenda, and thank you to all of the participants. Once again, my name is Hassan Wasaja from Uganda. Brenda, our model of implementation for IFRIS was quite unique from the rest of the presenters. And for us as Uganda, we focused more on a software model. And our approach was, we have a software that the taxpayer can use regardless of the device. So in our implementation, we ensured that we have a variety of options. And our system, we had an approach that can cater for all the categories of the taxpayers. And in summary, for us, we call it EFRIS, standing for Electronic Fiscal Receipting and Invoicing Solution. Now, this solution has 3 components. And the first component is what we are referring to as e-invoicing. Now, under e-invoicing, we are giving a taxpayer the following options. The first option under e-invoicing is if you already have your billing system, what you need to do is to connect your billing system with the EFRIS system such that you continue to generate invoices both in offline mode and online mode. So how do you connect? It is quite simple. You either use your internal IT team, or we have provided these taxpayers a list of accredited system vendors. So once your system has been connected, you will continue to use your system. Now, the system invoicing option is suited for taxpayers with many invoices and with a billing system. However, we have taxpayers that do not have billing systems. Also, under e-invoicing, we have given them a second option that we are calling the desktop application. Now, a desktop application is a URA billing system that you download from the URA web portal, install it on your computer, and continue or start using the invoicing option because you don't have a billing system. Now, this is suited for taxpayers without billing systems. We have also gone ahead to provide an invoicing option on the URA web portal because we believe there are some sectors that do not generate many invoices, but they want to comply with EFRIS implementation. So what we did was to create an invoicing option on the URA portal where a client can access using their TIN and password, and they're able to comply and generate e-invoices. Then we have a second component of the electronic fiscal devices that my colleagues have talked about. For this particular component, we encourage taxpayers, especially those that are using the root sales or field sales, taxpayers that have moving shops. They're always selling in the field. So they can use the electronic fiscal devices to still comply. The third component is what we are calling the electronic dispenser controller. That one we have not rolled it out, but we are in the final stages. And this one is going to be particularly for the taxpayers in the retail or fuel sector. So we believe once we have all these options, then all our taxpayers will at least have an option that is easy to comply with, both from the side of the tax administration and also on the side of the taxpayer. The objective is quite simple. We want to make sure that we manage and support the issuance of e-invoices in a centralized format in accordance to the law for all taxpayers that have been gazetted to use EFRIS, to make sure that we support domestic revenue mobilization and maximize the revenue yield by narrowing the revenue gap between the expected revenue to be collected and the actual revenue to be collected. Now, similar to Kenya, Uganda, for us, we have also just implemented IFRIS. Our effective date of rollout was January 2021. And we have seen all VAT registered taxpayers, as required by law, coming onto IFRIS. And as we talk now, our register stands at 31,529 taxpayers. However, as I said, that we are still in the onboarding process. We have only managed to onboard 65% out of the 31,000 taxpayers using IFRIS. Now, the 65%, ever since we started, on average, they are able to post an average of 5.6 million invoices. And this has also helped in the translation of revenue, where we have seen at least a 14% increase in the VAT collection attributed to IFRIS. In terms of challenges, Brenda, because we have just implemented IFRIS, we've not encountered significant challenges. However, when we were rolling out IFRIS, IFRIS was rolled out in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that affected our rollout plan because of the COVID restrictions, the limitations. We couldn't train, we couldn't engage as much as we wanted, or as much as our rollout plan was stipulated. So we were affected in terms of the timelines to onboard all VAT registered taxpayers. And that is one of the reasons why we are still at 65%. Because with such a solution, you need to engage and engage and engage. Because if you don't engage, then you will have challenges. The second challenge that we have encountered is especially for system-to-system taxpayers. We all know that taxpayers are using different invoicing or billing systems. And it takes time to connect or integrate somebody's billing system, because others are using vendors that are outside Uganda. Others are managing this system centrally. Others are storing their data in the cloud. So the time it takes to integrate, to test, before you finally move into production, that one has also been a challenge. But we have encountered that or mitigated that by, number one, asking or ensuring that taxpayers that are using off-shelf systems can able to go to the local accredited system vendors, and they are given versions that are supported by IFRIS instead of developing from scratch. And this approach has helped us in onboarding the majority of these clients, because you will find that a TADAT licensed vendor in Uganda is having more than 80 or 500 taxpayers. And once you onboard this one software vendor, is able to bring you the 500 clients of ease. And that one has really helped us to make sure that we succeed in our implementation. Another aspect where I said in terms of success is the management support. Management has really supported us in this implementation. One, by making sure that from the project perspective, they are fully supported, and this was initiated as a project to make sure we develop a solution with all the options that I have talked about. The second is that management has also put in place a dedicated team to support the operationalization of IFRIS. Now, this dedicated team is in charge of a fully dedicated manager to make sure that, number one, people are using IFRIS, and we're also seeing value after the use of IFRIS. Then another aspect that has helped us to smoothly onboard IFRIS is that we have moved and implemented what we call system validation checks. As we talk now, a VAT registered taxpayer can only claim input tax. A VAT registered taxpayer can only claim a VAT refund based on a fiscalized invoice. Now, because of that, we have seen many people coming on board onto IFRIS. Another aspect that has helped us is we have summarized the sales of the taxpayer, the purchases of the taxpayer, the stock of the taxpayer in preparation of the previewed tax returns. Currently now, as we're waiting for previewed tax returns that will be deployed, I think in the third quarter of this financial year, a taxpayer can now quickly, through IFRIS, access their monthly sales, their monthly purchases, and their stock. And this has eased the way of doing business and has simplified the return filing process. Lastly, in IFRIS, we have also gone ahead to implement the stock management model. And this one has given value to the majority of the VAT registered taxpayers that are required to use IFRIS, because they are able now to see their stock. And this one has really helped our taxpayers. Lastly, is that we worked on the legal framework before we rolled out IFRIS. We didn't roll out IFRIS together with the legal framework. We first worked on the legal framework, and later on we introduced IFRIS. But having said that, the most important success story that we have is engagement of taxpayers. We have engaged despite we had the COVID, but we tried our level best to engage by providing online trainings, online engagements, to make sure that before a taxpayer goes onto IFRIS, number one, he knows that I'm not going onto IFRIS only to pay taxes. There is much more value that I would get onto using IFRIS, as an example of improving my record keeping, tracking my invoices, authenticating my invoices in real time. So we have emphasized the value through engagement, and this one has helped us. Thank you, Brenda. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Hassan. Just before you go, members are asking what IFRIS means. You've said a lot of IFRIS. Can you just spell it out for them? Hassan?
Thank you, Brenda. I don't know that I was not loud enough, but in my opening remarks, I said IFRIS stands for Electronic Fiscal Receipting and Invoicing Solution.
Okay, and I would just like you to also re-echo, because we had a question that came through from the audience. If the software to generate the third-party invoices is an off-the-shelf software, and is it readily available so that taxpayers can be directed to it?
Thank you. The invoicing software is a customized software based on the conditions in Uganda. Now, because we customized it, For us, we give it to the taxpayers free of charge. So taxpayers can download that software from the eFreeze web portal at any time.
Okay, thank you so much, Hassan. You've ably reflected and shown us what is happening in Uganda and the fact that Uganda has adopted a software-based model. And in fact, one of the members in the audience, John Chakasikwa, has mentioned that one of his key takeaways from this engagement is about the journey of fiscalization and the fact that software-based solutions are the way to go for those tax administrations that are still low on device-based systems. And I think one of the key things that stands out even through TADAT is the fact that we should be able to look at the costs that taxpayers incur in terms of voluntary compliance. So yes, lessons learned from these device-based systems are important in doing others. And she has also shared with us the advantages of software-based solutions outweigh the disadvantages of the device-based solutions. We have a question from Mr. Joseph Christopher Musumba Mogeza, and I would like to direct this question to Honest. He says he would like to hear more on the penalties or deterrence measures in place in case of non-compliance, especially that you have had IFRIS going in Tanzania, United Republic of Tanzania, for the last 12 years. Honest?
Okay, thank you for the question. Of course, regarding the punitive measures that are taken in case one does not comply. Now, as far as the United Republic of Tanzania is concerned, both the seller and the buyer have an obligation. The seller has an obligation to issue a fiscal receipt for every sale that is made, but also the buyer has an obligation to demand for an EFD receipt, a fiscalized receipt, and also has an obligation to report denial of being given a receipt by a seller. So in case one does not issue a receipt, then there is, of course, a penalty. It goes, there is a range between 3 million up to 4.5 million Tanzania shillings. So that's the range. And this is for the seller. So as far as the buyer is concerned, of course, there are also penalties, and they commence from 30,000 Tanzanian shillings all the way to 150,000 Tanzanian shillings. And all this is in order to compel both parties to comply with the provisions of the tax laws. So those are the penalties that are in place. Of course, there are other penalties that might be related to the non-usage of EFDs, but then those are the two main ones.
Okay, thank you so much, Honest. I just have a follow-up question for you from Mr. Justin Zake. And he's asking, how does TRA, Tanzania Revenue Authority, enforce these penalties that you've just talked about?
Okay, so the enforcement of these particular penalties, as you all know that as a tax administration, we are quasi-judicial, meaning that there are two routes. First and foremost, an offense is issued to the taxpayer, which clearly states that this particular taxpayer has breached a certain provision regarding the issuance, let's say, of an EFD receipt. Then this particular taxpayer is given a period of 7 days. And within this period of 7 days, this taxpayer has to show up and request that that particular offense be compounded by the Commissioner General. So in case this particular person does not do that, then this is escalated to the legal department, whereby now it has to follow the judicial route. So now we have to meet in court. But then in most cases, people opt to settle with the Commissioner General. So they will come to our offices, and then that particular offense will be compounded and the charge will be created, and they will have to settle that particular charge immediately. So that is how we do. But also there are cases in which, let's say, what is involved is, let's say, cargo, a particular cargo that is involved. So that particular cargo can be seized in order to compel a person to come up to our offices and, of course, to compound that particular offense. Of course, one is given a seizure notice and required to show up. So that is how we enforce this particular penalties. But if someone is not interested in going this route, they may also opt for the court.
Okay, Honest, I hear us going into the performance outcome area of tax dispute resolution, and thank you for the response provided. We are 7 minutes past our time, and we apologize for that time that we've taken. But as we are concluding, I would like to hear some parting shots from David. A lot has been shared for the different tax administrations of what's happening. Would just like to hear from you, David, on how you can summarize for us all that has been discussed. Then we can see how to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Blenda. I think that what is important, as you mentioned, and all the speakers, is we have to take in mind the cost for compliance. I read the interesting questions that we have from the audience, and what we have to take in mind is the cost of compliance, and of course, to face the challenges that the taxpayer has to adopt that kind of solutions. We have to understand that this is a big change in the way they manage the internal processes, and also to create some incentives for them to start adopting this. As we have some information that they can have without processing, for example, these tax returns, as I mentioned at the beginning, they will be more aware of the benefits, and they will be more cooperating with us. So the idea is to take in mind the cost of compliance for them, the facilitating them, the processes and the work that they have to do to fulfill all the requirements that we have with the tax administration. And of course, from the side of the tax administration, it's very important to understand what we will do with the information, how we will use it, not only to facilitate the compliance, but also to take decisions and control the information that we have from them, as we mentioned with the anomaly detector, and having some decisions to risk management for compliance. And that's what I can say, Blenda. Thank you very much for facilitating and for the participants.
Okay, thank you so much, David. I see more questions coming through. And as has been the practice for us, if a topic is having a lot that is coming through and yet we need more to discuss about it, we hold more sessions regarding the same topic so that we can fully exhaust it. So every 2 weeks, we have sessions that we hold to discuss different issues regarding tax administrations or revenue administration in line with the TADAT. Okay, we need to mute. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, and as we conclude, I was mentioning that we have a couple of topics that we are looking towards looking at in our subsequent sessions that we shall be holding every 2 weeks. And just to mention some of them, we are looking at areas like digitalization of money or assets, mobile money, cryptocurrency taxation. We are looking at topics like wealth taxes, which has received great attention, as well as windfall taxation in the energy sector. The questions that have come through, comments that have come through from our audience, we are truly grateful and we are going to take note of them, and we should be able to respond to them subsequently. And at this point, I would like to invite Mr. Justin Zake, our mentor, who has been the person behind guiding us in terms of making this a success, to give his remarks as we conclude. Mr. Zake,
thank you very much, Blenda, and thank you very much, all the presenters. Obviously, we have not exhausted this topic, and you can see the range of activities and systems across from Latin America right through to Africa and other countries. There will be a sequel to this one, most definitely. And David, you will have to come back. You'll have to come back. I think the theme of these whole discussions is, let's not reinvent the wheel. Other people have been there, they have done these things, they have had challenges, and we can learn from that. Resources are so scarce that we cannot afford to, let me use the word, waste them, okay? If we learn from each other and know what pitfalls there were, for example, started with the physical devices, now it is software-based, and it opens up so many opportunities. It's mind-boggling. One of the things we need to think about, and I'm trying to link this particular topic with the one on cybersecurity. Yes, we are digitalizing and FRIS, whatever you want to call it, all these digital devices. What about the security side of things? Sometimes we're very eager to digitalize and do everything that way, but we have persons who can take advantage of this and hack through the systems and so on. I liked the comment made by David of using AI and related algorithms to search for risky taxpayers or to search for unusual behavior. Credit card companies do this a lot. And that's the way we need to go, so that we protect the investments that we've already made in these areas and reduce the cost of compliance and also be more efficient and effective. Thank you very much, everybody. I know that Lesotho, Penny, reach out to me, and I will direct you to many others who are in this field. You wanted to know which companies. Let's do a direct contact, Penny, and we'll get there. I thank you very, very much, all the organizers and the people in the back room who are broadcasting this particular session, LinkedIn, YouTube. Very grateful. We want these conversations to continue. We don't need to wait for a year or 6 months in order to talk to each other. And that's why the TADAT Secretariat has offered this platform so that people can actually talk together. And those of you who are eligible for the TADAT Community of Practice platform called TADAT Connect, please go in there, because a lot of the outcomes of these sessions will be posted there, and there's a rich discussion that goes on. Blenda, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zake. And indeed, yes, there's a lot of learning that is taking place through these peer-to-peer learning sessions. That being said, I would like to take this opportunity, yes, to appreciate each of the organizers that have been behind these particular sessions, members of the TADAT Learning Group from URA and KRA, Uganda Revenue Authority, and Kenya Revenue Authority. We appreciate you. You're doing an amazing job, and to the TADAT Secretariat, the support that you have always provided, we sincerely appreciate providing a platform for us to learn as tax administrations, to learn from each other and continue to grow together. Thank you so much, and